Okay, so today we're doing a deep dive into Lijiang Ancient City.
Okay.
And I have to say, just looking at this video from Duck Travel,
Yeah.
it's called Lijiang, Yunnan, the most beautiful fairy tale town in China. And it's in 4K.
Wow.
So it's like visually stunning,
Yeah.
but it's giving me like serious wanderlust.
Right.
Like I just want to hop on a plane and go.
I hear you.
But I think before we dive into like the visuals and the experience of it,
Sure.
can you give us a little bit of context? Like
Yeah.
what makes this place so special historically and culturally?
Well, I think the thing that's really remarkable about Lijiang is that it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site,
Right.
and it has over 700 years of history. And what's so captivating about it is that when you walk through the streets,
Yeah.
you can really see and feel that history.
Wow.
The buildings themselves are mostly from the Ming and Qing dynasties, and so you're literally looking at architecture.
Wow.
That's centuries old.
So for those of us who might not be like total history buffs, can you break down like what those dynasties mean architecturally?
So, when you think about the Ming dynasty, that's from like the 14th to the 17th centuries,
Okay.
they were known for their grandeur.
Oh.
So think of like massive structures, vibrant colors, really intricate details.
Oh, wow.
Then you have the Qing dynasty, which came after and lasted until the early 1900s.
Okay.
And they brought a more refined, elegant style, often incorporating elaborate gardens and courtyards.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and in Lijiang, you really see that evolution. You see that blend of those styles in the architecture.
So it's like not just one uniform like ancient China look, it's like layers of history you can see.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a monolith.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you also have the blending of two distinct cultures.
Oh, right.
The Han, who are the dominant ethnic group in China.
Yeah.
And then the Naxi, an indigenous people native to the Yunnan province.
Right. And I feel like the video does a really nice job of showcasing that contrast too.
Yeah.
Like you see these really bustling streets with tons of energy.
Right.
And then suddenly you turn a corner and you're in like a tranquil little alleyway
Absolutely.
with these beautiful old buildings.
It's that interplay that really gives Lijiang its unique charm.
Yeah.
So like in the video, we see Square Street, which is like the commercial heart of the city.
Yeah.
And it's like teeming with vendors and shops, and there's so much energy.
Yeah.
But then you have places like Mufu Mansion.
Oh, yeah. The Mufu Mansion, like that really stood out to me in the video.
Yeah.
It was once the home of the Naxi rulers, right?
That's right, the ruling family of the Naxi people, and now it's a museum.
Oh, wow.
And architecturally, it's a really great example of that Han-Naxi fusion I was talking about.
Okay.
So the Naxi, they often incorporated these upward sweeping roofs,
Yeah.
almost like they're reaching for the sky, which was a symbol of their reverence for the mountains.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and then you see the Han influence in the intricate wooden lattice work and those beautiful courtyards.
And speaking of Naxi ingenuity, like those giant water wheels are incredible.
They're impressive.
Like the video gives you a real sense of the scale of them.
Yeah, they're massive.
They're not just decorative, right?
Oh, definitely not.
Like what was their purpose?
So they were essential to the city's water system.
Wow.
They used the power of the river to like irrigate crops.
Wow.
And it's really a testament to the Naxi people's understanding of hydraulics,
Yeah, that's amazing.
like centuries ago.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's amazing what they were able to build.
And the Dashi Bridge, too.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like the place to be for incredible views.
Yeah, you get these panoramic views of the city.
And Duck, the narrator, he talks about how it's especially beautiful at sunset.
Oh, I bet.
Have you been there at sunset?
Unfortunately not.
Oh,
That's
no.
definitely on my list.
Yeah, well, this whole place is on my list now.
It's magical.
But it seems like Lijiang really comes alive at night, too.
It does, yeah. As the sun starts to set, it's almost like the city takes on this whole new personality. So those alleys that we're talking about become almost magical with the soft lighting.
Oh, I bet.
And then you have Bar Street, which has this totally different energy.
Oh, right.
It's like very modern.
So you can choose your vibe.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
can go like super chill or you can go like party.
You got it.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a nice mix.
And I thought it was interesting, Duck mentioned how like surprisingly peaceful
Yeah.
the main commercial street felt, even with all the activity.
Yep.
And he also pointed out like the allure of those smaller shops like tucked away in the alleys.
Yeah, like those hidden gems.
Yeah.
Those little places that you just stumble upon.
It's like you can have that like bustling city experience,
Yeah,
but then also those like quiet, intimate moments.
exactly. And I think that's really special about Lijiang.
Yeah.
It offers you both.
So what does this all mean for our listener? Like, why should someone listening to this care about Lijiang?
Oh, I think Lijiang offers a very unique kind of travel experience. It's not just about, like, sightseeing. It's
Yeah.
about immersing yourself in history and culture.
Yeah.
You can walk in the footsteps of the Naxi people and see how their traditions shaped this place.
Right.
And it makes you think, if you could wander through those streets,
Yeah.
what would you be drawn to?
Yeah.
Would it be the energy of that market?
Yeah.
Or the peace of, like, a tea house overlooking the river?
Yeah.
Or maybe, like, the stories hidden within Mufu Mansion?
You've definitely, like, piqued my interest.
Good.
I think I'm going to have to add this to my travel bucket list.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah. This deep dive has been really fascinating.
It's a special place.
Thanks so much for sharing your insights.
Of course.
It's been a really great journey.
My pleasure.
All right. Well,
All right, let's jump right in. We're diving deep into China today. More specifically, we're going to try to get a better understanding of China, how it sees itself and its place in the world.
a great goal. And we've got some fascinating material to work with for this deep dive.
We do. We're going to be looking at 2 YouTube videos. One's a travel vlog, gorgeous footage of Lijiang from Duck Travel. And the other, from Siminglan, dives into some pretty heavy questions about, well, China's identity, how it views the West and all that.
So we've got a visual journey through Lijiang paired with a deep dive into China's worldview.
Right, like 2 sides of the same coin. Now Lijiang, wow, this Duck Travel video, it's incredible. I mean, the architecture alone. You're talking Ming and Qing dynasties.
Buildings that have stood for 700 years. That's mind-blowing.
I know. And the streets, these narrow cobblestone streets with the river winding through the city, it's just magical.
But there's another layer here, right? This isn't just your typical Han Chinese city. Lijiang is home to the Naxi people.
Oh, yeah. Different culture, traditions, the whole thing.
A real blend, a cultural crossroads, if you will, which makes it even more fascinating as a kind of microcosm of China. You know what I mean?
Totally. Like, you've got these bustling commercial streets, shops everywhere, and then you turn a corner and it's like you step back in time. Quiet riverside paths, little hidden alleys.
The video mentions it wasn't even that crowded when they were filming, which is kind of amazing. Imagine experiencing that peacefulness.
I know, right? Makes you want to book a flight immediately. But it's not just about the pretty pictures. Siminglan, in their video, they point out that Lijiang, it's like a reflection of something deeper. How China sees itself, especially compared to the West.
Yeah. Siminglan really gets into some tough questions. Like, why doesn't China identify with Western-style democracy? How has China's history shaped its current worldview?
Which leads us to a really important point. Why does China seem so resistant to the whole idea of democracy, the way much of the West embraces it? Siminglan argues it's a fundamental clash of values between China and the West.
And to understand that clash, we need to look at the philosophical roots. The West, coming out of the Enlightenment and all that, huge emphasis on individualism, natural rights, government by consent, justice, individual liberties. Think Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, even Tocqueville.
Big names, big ideas. And China, well, they went a different direction.
Right. China, it's heavily influenced by Confucianism.
Okay.
So instead of individualism, you have collectivism, filial piety, that deep respect for elders and ancestors, obedience to authority, and a government that's responsible for its people's well-being.
It's a whole different framework. In Confucianism, family isn't just about love, right? It's about duty, hierarchy.
Exactly. And that difference is key to understanding why China prioritizes, say, social stability over individual expression. A good example. Siminglan uses this brilliant visual. The Chinese word for country, it's literally made up of the words for state and family.
Whoa, I never knew that. So those concepts, they're intertwined in Chinese society in a way that we in the West might not even grasp. I mean, no wonder they might see our emphasis on individual rights as a threat to social harmony.
And that's not even taking into account the historical trauma. We're talking about the century of humiliation.
So this is where things get, well, pretty heavy. Because to understand China today, you have to understand this period in their history.
Absolutely. The fall of the Qing dynasty, 1911, it marked the beginning of a very turbulent period for China. Think about it. A dynasty collapses, republics fail, even a monarchy doesn't work out. They were desperate for stability, and that's where the CCP comes in.
Promising strength and order.
Right.
So this historical context, it helps explain why the party still has so much power today.
And that need for stability was, well, it was made even stronger by outside pressures. I mean, China wasn't just dealing with internal problems. They were being exploited by foreign powers. That's a big part of this century of humiliation.
So they see everything through that lens.
Yeah. And it colors how they view a lot of Western criticisms even today. whether it's about their political system, human rights, foreign policy. What we in the West might see as legitimate concerns, they see as attacks. You know, attempts to undermine their sovereignty, hold them back.
Wow. It really is woven into their psyche. Seminglan also mentioned the proxy war, between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. How does that fit in?
Oh, that's a critical piece. See, after the Communist Revolution, China allied with the Soviet Union, modeled their whole system after them, their political system, their economy.
So that solidified the whole one-party state thing and cemented their stance against Western-style democracy.
Exactly. And the legacy of that alignment, I mean, is still with us today, along with the century of humiliation narrative. It shapes how they see us, how they interact with us. There's this sense that they're finally reclaiming their place in the world, and they're not going to let anyone push them around anymore.
Okay, so a lot of historical baggage. It informs how they act, how they react. But what about the people themselves? How do they view this whole relationship with the West?
That's a great question. Seminglan argues that there's a lot of national pride. I mean, they've seen their country go from poverty and war to a global powerhouse. That's got to have an impact.
Yeah, the video really highlights their economic transformation. It's pretty incredible.
And that success has reinforced the idea that their model works. Even with the authoritarian elements, it's brought prosperity and stability. People feel that.
But does that mean there's no pushback, no desire for more freedom?
You have to remember, China's a big place. There are lots of different viewpoints. But Seminglan's point is that the collective memory of suffering, the narrative of national rejuvenation, it creates a powerful sense of unity. People prioritize the strength and stability of the nation over, say, individual liberties.
It's almost like the government uses that narrative, that national pride, to keep control.
Yeah, that's a valid observation. They've tied the party's legitimacy to the idea of national rejuvenation. So if you challenge the party, you're seen as undermining China's progress, betraying the sacrifices of those who came before.
So it's a balancing act between what people want as individuals and what they see as their duty to the collective.
Right. And it's constantly evolving. People might want more freedom, but they also believe in a strong, unified China, a China that can stand up to the world. Which brings us back to the Middle Kingdom mentality.
Ah, yes. Does that contribute to a sense of superiority? Or maybe even isolation, like they're better than everyone else, so they don't need to engage with the rest of the world?
Well, the Middle Kingdom concept is complex. It's changed over time. Historically, it was definitely about seeing themselves as the center of civilization, surrounded by barbarians. But today, it's less about superiority, more about having a unique cultural and political model.
So it's like we do things our own way. It's worked for centuries, so we don't need to follow your rules.
Exactly. Yeah, they believe in their own path to modernity. It doesn't have to look like the West's, which can lead to a lot of friction, you know? When the West tries to push democracy or human rights, it feels like an intrusion to them, disrespectful of their values.
This is all so insightful. It really shows that to understand China, you have to understand their history, their culture, how they see the world. It's key to making sense of this relationship with the West. But what does it all mean for the future? Where do we go from here?
That's the big question, isn't it? As China keeps growing in power and influence, figuring this out is going to become even more important. Remember how Seminglan ended their video? They said China is a very lonely country.
Oh, yeah. What do you think they meant by that?
I think they were getting at this idea that even though China's successful economically, even though their influence is growing, they're still struggling to be understood by the West, accepted on their own terms.
Like they're isolated, even as they become more powerful.
Right. Isolated because of the clash of values, the historical baggage, the sense that they're just different, fundamentally different, and maybe even a threat to the way the West sees the world.
So it's this weird tension. They want to be acknowledged, respected for what they've accomplished, but they also don't want to give up their own identity. They don't want to be forced to conform.
Exactly. They want to be part of the global community, but on their own terms, which honestly is probably going to cause some headaches for everyone involved.
And that brings us back to Lijiang, that beautiful city we started with.
It's a perfect example, isn't it? This blend of Naxi and Han influences, the beauty of the past, the energy of the present, ancient architecture right next to bustling shops, traditions mixing with modern life.
It's a microcosm of this whole balancing act, trying to hold on to what makes them unique while also moving forward.
It shows that there's so much more to China than what we see in the headlines.
So much depth and complexity.
And that's what we've tried to do in this deep dive. Explore that complexity. Go beyond the surface.
We've looked at the amazing visuals of Lijiang, We've dug into China's identity, its history, its relationship with the West.
We've seen how those historical experiences, like the Century of Humiliation, how that shapes their worldview, how it led to the rise of the CCP, and how that, in turn, has led to this strong sense of nationalism, this determination to do things their own way.
But now, here's a question for you to think about. Knowing what you know now about Lijiang, about China's history, its culture, how do you think all of that influences China's place in the world today? How will it shape their future?
It's a big question, and it's one that deserves a lot more thought, a lot more exploration. But hopefully, this deep dive has given you some of the tools you need to start finding those answers.
So keep learning, keep exploring, keep asking questions. The journey to understanding China, it's never really over, and we'll be here to help guide you along the way. Until next time. Like, they're isolated, even as they become more powerful.
Right. Isolated because of the clash of values, the historical baggage, the sense that they're just different, fundamentally different, and maybe even a threat to the way the West sees the world.
So it's this weird tension. They want to be acknowledged, respected for what they've accomplished, but they also don't want to give up their own identity. They don't want to be forced to conform.
Exactly. They want to be part of the global community, but on their own terms, which honestly is probably going to cause some headaches for everyone involved.
And that brings us back to Lijiang, that beautiful city we started with.
It's a perfect example, isn't it? This blend of Naxi and Han influences, the beauty of the past, the energy of the present, ancient architecture right next to bustling shops, traditions mixing with modern life.
It's a microcosm of this whole balancing act, trying to hold on to what makes them unique while also moving forward.
It shows that there's so much more to China than what we see in the headlines.
So much depth and complexity.
And that's what we've tried to do in this deep dive. Explore that complexity. Go beyond the surface.
We've looked at the amazing visuals of Lijiang. We've dug into China's identity, its history, its relationship with the West.
We've seen how those historical experiences, like the Century of Humiliation, how that shapes their worldview, how it led to the rise of the CCP, and how that, in turn, has led to this strong sense of nationalism, this determination to do things their own way.
But now, here's a question for you to think about. Knowing what you know now about Lijiang, about China's history, its culture, how do you think all of that influences China's place in the world today? How will it shape their future?
It's a big question, and it's one that deserves a lot more thought, a lot more exploration. But hopefully this deep dive has given you some of the tools you need to start finding those answers.
So keep learning, keep exploring, keep asking questions. The journey to understanding China, it's never really over. And we'll be here to help guide you along the way. Until next time.